Okay, so this is lesson 4. This is intended for days 4 and 5. Again, you may need to modify to fit the needs of your class. So on the agenda today is review project expectations and work with groups to develop a plan and presentation. So students will be able to work collaboratively with their peers and design or alter a school policy or event so that it is more culturally diverse and responsive. Essential question: what role does culture play in shaping our school community? So for this final day, I'm going to have the students start off with a quick write and have them reflect or analyze the school event or policy that they may need to change. So their prompt is, what is one event or policy on campus that you do not see yourself as being included? Why or why not? So this should be a fairly quick write, about 5 minutes, and it may be harder for some students than others, but they should try to find something. During this time, students will work collaboratively to select a school policy or event that they see as not valuing or including the school's diverse populations. At this time, if groups do not wish to make revisions to an already set policy or event, they can begin discussing what they would like to work on as a group and create from scratch. So this is intended to be a platform for them to springboard off of with ideas for their groups. And they can just have an open discussion about what they feel they want to do. Next, students will explore some of the school events and policies. So for the sake of the students, I would maybe have a list of events that the school holds each year, or some policies that you feel aren't inclusive or reflective of the diverse culture, and give them something to kind of have as a reference. So they'll begin their research and inquiry or design process. So they need to create a think sheet. I just typically have my students do this on a blank white sheet of paper. They will work on creating a list of components that they feel need to be represented or need to be incorporated for others, or to make the event or policy more inclusive. So they're going to need to go back to the previous lessons and look at their quick writes and look at their notes and their graphic organizers and decide what do they think needs to be present. And it can be a short list, it can be a longer list, but it's just their group's list to kind of help them generate some ideas. After that, students will share whole class the components that they feel need to be incorporated. So the reason that I included this component was that, you know, you might have groups that just aren't able to generate those ideas, and this allows that time for students to gather more information and gain those insights from others. So this should help create more awareness and get students thinking about the components they have not thought about of as far as an individual or as a group. So maybe there's a student in another group that really doesn't see themselves, and they have a perspective that others in the class don't. And this allows that to get conveyed so that the group can create or revise that policy or event. And then at this time, you would have some type of chart paper or just at the front on a whiteboard, or however you kind of display these class ideas, you'll have a list going. And at this time, it would be a great time to clarify any misunderstandings, because they might have this idea of like seeing themselves and like not being included, where, you know, they might say, oh, well, you know, I don't feel included in basketball. And you would have to kind of get more answers out of them and ask those questions. Well, like, why don't you feel included? Oh, I didn't make the team. Well, why didn't you make the team? You know, I didn't have the skills. Well, that's not necessarily like being left out for cultural purposes or identity purposes. It's a lack of skill set and it's a competitive sport. So you may have to kind of work around those. So when I say clarifying misunderstandings, that's really kind of what I'm talking about. So at this time, I would provide an example for my students. So I would, or a reference for my students. And this could be something that they could also use. Maybe you might have some of those lower ability level students that need a little bit more scaffolding, and this might be the piece for that. So what I would do is I would model a project or proposal, and that would need to be laid out, that the students would be presenting. And so for this, I would utilize my school's academic calendar and showcase how that calendar doesn't always represent the diverse cultures. So we have components on there such as Thanksgiving and Christmas and other holidays here and there. And those represent essentially very traditional American values, but don't always represent a lot of the other values or traditions or beliefs that our students hold at our campus. And so I would just modify that and show them how I would present that this maybe needs to be included to be more culturally inclusive. After that, students would be given the remaining time in class to work on their projects, their designs, and their presentations. You can utilize Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, and have them use a medium of their choice to access the content or present the content. But traditionally, I find that Google Presentation tends to work best because it streamlines things, it's easy to access. And I am lucky enough to have a class, or I'd be at a school where every student's one-to-one with an iPad, and we utilize Google Classroom and Google Drive. So that just tends to be my go-to. But if you want to provide more of a variety, feel free to do that. So you're just giving them this work time. And they may just kind of come up with an idea at this time and not really get too far in actually making revisions, but creating kind of a map and drawing some ideas up. So for closure, you can check in with them, review the objective. Did you learn how to be more inclusive? What components did you really think were the most valuable in being inclusive or culturally responsive? Going back to those components that are up on the board or the poster. And then at the end, for their exit ticket, you can have the students do a Google form or a half sheet and submit a brief overview of their project, or essentially a proposal of what they are wanting to move forward with, so that you can kind of check in on that before they really dive into it the next day in class. So then after this lesson, essentially, the next day would be devoted to them actually putting together the event or the proposal or the revision, and they would have the whole class time to do that, minus the presentations. And so again, you may need to modify for time's sake, make some of this homework. It just kind of depends on what you are looking to do. And that would be the final lesson.